The room fell silent the moment the CEO leaned forward, a cold smile stretching across his face as he tapped the glass table and said, "I dare you." Every eye in the boardroom turned toward Armin Qureshi, the single father who had shown up 10 minutes late, shirt slightly wrinkled, breath uneven, and hope hanging by a fragile thread. The kind of man people underestimated the moment they saw him. The kind of man who had nothing left to lose. And yet, in that moment, something shifted. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people who refuse to give up, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Echoes the Stories. Because stories like this deserve to be heard. Armin stood there, his fingers tightening around the worn leather folder he carried everywhere. Inside it were reports no one had asked for, notes no one had read, and a truth no one had wanted to hear. He wasn't supposed to be in that room. He was just a mid-level analyst in a company too large to notice him and too fast-moving to care. But he had requested this meeting anyway, requested it 3 times, actually, until someone reluctantly allowed him 5 minutes on the agenda. 5 minutes to challenge a decision worth $700 million. 5 minutes to risk everything. And he had almost missed it. That morning had started like most others. His 6-year-old daughter, Meher, had woken up with a fever, her small hands clinging to him, refusing to let go. He had sat beside her bed, whispering promises that he would be back soon, that everything would be okay, even though he wasn't sure it would. The babysitter had cancelled, the medicine was running low, and his phone kept buzzing with reminders of the meeting that could change his career, or end it. He had chosen to stay 5 extra minutes. 5 minutes that made him late. 5 minutes that now stood between him and respect. As he stood in that boardroom, facing executives who wore confidence like armor, Armin could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on him. The CEO, Razak Siddiqui, was known for his ruthless decisions and sharp instincts. He was the kind of man who built empires and crushed doubts without hesitation. And right now, his gaze was fixed on Armin with something dangerously close to amusement. "You're late," Razak said, his voice smooth but cutting. Armin nodded, swallowing the urge to explain. Because explanations sounded like excuses, and excuses were the fastest way to be dismissed. "You asked for 5 minutes," the CEO continued. "You now have 2. Make it worth it." Armin took a slow breath, steadying himself. This was it. No second chances, no safety net. He opened the folder and placed a series of documents on the table. Charts, projections, risk analyses, all carefully compiled over weeks of late nights and early mornings. He had done this after putting Meher to sleep, after washing dishes, after pretending everything was fine. "This acquisition," he began, his voice quieter than he intended but steady enough, "the company we're about to invest in, there's a discrepancy in their valuation." A few executives exchanged glances. Someone smirked. Razak leaned back, folding his arms. "Go on." Armin pointed to a graph. "Their projected revenue growth is inflated. Not slightly, significantly. They've based their forecasts on contracts that aren't legally binding yet. If even half of those fall through, we're looking at a potential loss of over $700 million. The room didn't react the way he expected. No shock. No concern. Just silence. Then a soft chuckle broke through. "You're telling me," one executive said, "that our entire due diligence team missed this, but you caught it from your desk?" Armin didn't flinch. "Yes." That was when Razak leaned forward again, his eyes narrowing with interest rather than dismissal. "I dare you," the CEO said quietly, his voice now carrying a different kind of weight. "Prove it." The words hung in the air like a challenge carved in stone. Armin felt his heart pounding, but something inside him steadied. Maybe it was the thought of Meher lying in bed, trusting him to make things right. Maybe it was the years of being overlooked, underestimated, ignored. Or maybe it was the simple realization that fear had already cost him too much. He stepped closer to the table. "Give me access to the full contract database," he said. "Give me 24 hours. Razak raised an eyebrow. "That's a bold request." "It's a necessary one." The room shifted uneasily. This wasn't how things usually went. People didn't challenge the system. They followed it. But Armin wasn't thinking about the system. He was thinking about truth. And for the first time, Razak smiled, not the mocking smile from before, but something sharper, more intrigued. "You have 12 hours, he said. Not 24. It was less time than Armin needed. But it was enough. What followed was a race against exhaustion, doubt, and time itself. Armin spent those 12 hours locked in a small office, surrounded by screens and stacks of data. He skipped meals, ignored calls, and pushed himself beyond the edge of what felt possible. Every number he verified felt like a step closer to something bigger than himself. Every inconsistency he uncovered felt like a crack in a wall no one else had noticed. And slowly, the truth began to take shape. Contracts that looked solid at first glance were filled with conditional clauses. Partnerships were based on verbal agreements rather than signed documents. Revenue streams depended on market conditions that were already shifting. It wasn't just a risk. It was a ticking time bomb. By the time the 12 hours were up, Armin could barely keep his eyes open. But his folder was heavier now, not with hope, but with proof. He walked back into the boardroom the next morning, his steps slower but more certain. The executives were already there. So was Razak. "Time's up," the CEO said. Armin nodded and began. This time, there was no hesitation in his voice. No uncertainty in his tone. He laid out the evidence piece by piece, connecting the dots with precision and clarity. As he spoke, the room changed. The smirks faded. The whispers stopped. Even the most skeptical faces began to show signs of concern. And when he finished, the silence that followed was no longer dismissive. It was heavy. Real. Razak stood up slowly, walking toward the table. He picked up one of the documents, scanning it with a focused intensity. Then he looked at Armin. "You're right," he said. 3 simple words. But they carried the weight of everything. The deal was halted within hours. Further investigations confirmed Armin's findings. The company had narrowly avoided one of the biggest financial mistakes in its history. $700 million. Saved by a man who almost didn't make it to the meeting. But the real story wasn't about the money. It was about what came next. Armin didn't expect recognition. He didn't expect a promotion or applause. He had done what he believed was right, and that was enough. But Razak had other plans. A week later, Armin was called into the CEO's office. This time, there was no tension in the air. No challenge waiting on the other side of the desk. "Why were you late that day?" Razak asked. Armin hesitated for a moment before answering. "My daughter was sick." It was the first time he had said it out loud. Razak nodded slowly, as if something had clicked into place. "You saved this company from a disaster," he said. "And you almost didn't get the chance because you chose to be a father first." Armin didn't know how to respond. "People like you," Razak continued, "they don't come around often. Not because of talent, but because of integrity." That day, Armin's life changed. Not overnight, not magically, but meaningfully. He was promoted, yes. Given a role that matched his abilities. Given resources, respect, and a voice that people finally listened to. But more importantly, he was given something he hadn't expected. Understanding. Flexible hours. Support for his responsibilities as a parent. A workplace that, slowly but surely, began to value people not just for what they produced, but for who they were. And at home, Meher got her father back, not exhausted and distant, but present. There were still challenges. Still struggles. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. But it became real in a different way. Stronger. Warmer. And as time passed, Armin never forgot that moment in the boardroom, the moment someone dared him to prove himself, and he chose to rise instead of retreat. Because sometimes, all it takes is one chance. One voice. One person willing to say, "This isn't right." If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that courage and kindness still matter. And before this story ends, here's something special. Comment, "Second chances matter," if you believe that one moment can change a life forever. Because it can. It did for Armin. And maybe, just maybe, it can for someone out there who's still waiting for their chance to be heard.